This is a tutorial on how to make Roper pizza.
You want to slice fresh mozzarella, slice up garlic, fresh garlic, whole milk mozzarella, make sure it's fresh and local.
Take canned San Marzano tomatoes, whole, and put it in a pan, boil it, and use the back of the spoon to break up the tomatoes. Cook it until you get a nice, not so liquidy, chunky tomato mix. Make sure you have some washed, fresh basil. So now is the hardest part, the kneading of the dough. So I suggest buying a dough from the store, given that it's easier. Get some flour, and on the
Peel.
Flour it up, and flour up your dough really liberally, very liberally. The reason you want to do this is so it does not stick. So when kneading the dough, one of the key things is to use gravity. So you can create the dough just by using gravity here. You see that?
That's not how I do it, but okay. Sorry.
You're not part of this.
Sorry. We just had some comedy. Come on.
Alright. So, but you can also obviously use your hands like this, as I'm doing. And what you want to do is you want to take two fists and spread. Two fists and spread. Two fists and spread.
So using the gravity method or the fist method?
You can use both. So, because you have the same peel as me, what you want to do is make it more vertical, more lengthwise longer than wide. Just because it just ends up working out better that way.
Why, Obi-Wan?
Alright, cut. So once you show this here. Once you get a decent shape, now you're trying to fine tune it. Okay, and you see this little bunch down here? You really either want to get rid of that, or try to thin it out. But you don't really have much space, so I would just get rid of that. You don't need it.
Just
Toss
wasting.
it. You're not wasting it per se. I mean, you have only limited, space on this peel. You're trying to make the best pie you can. See that? Look, I made a mistake there. It's a little tiny hole. So if you ever do make a little hole, if it's too thin, you can just easily plug it up. No big deal. That shows you that that's thin. You can see how. Come here, come closer. See how you see my finger there? That tells you it's thin enough. Because you really want it pretty thin if you want a New York style pizza. Now, come here. See this crust here? This is where it's really thick. This is really want to use gravity in your finger and kind of knead through it. Because you don't want really a thick crust. And maybe you do. If you do, that's fine. But I would suggest, making it thinner. Like, you really don't want this thick stuff over here. And then I'll use gravity as much as you can possible on the sides. This is looking pretty good. Just as one area a little bunched up. And if you ever go like this, and you stretch it, it'll always stretch back. That's never gonna work. So the dough naturally shrinks back. So one thing you also want to do is not to peel. Take the stone and put it in the oven. And make sure you get as high as possible. I can do 550. And you want to keep it for at least half an hour. I mean, they recommend an hour, but at least I think half an hour is appropriate to really get that stone hot. Okay, so once you feel like you got a pretty decent dough going, the way to get it off, the hard part is getting this thing off the peel. All right. So what you want to do is you want to take the dough back and put flour underneath it, like that. That should be enough. Okay. And then take the other side, peel it back. Put dough here. Put flour here under the dough. Alright? And put it back. Alright. And then put your hand on the peel, and as long as it moves, you're good. Now, generally speaking,
If it doesn't move,
put more flour.
well,
Right.
you use the blowing.
So here's the thing. Generally speaking, you put toppings on top of the dough. However, in my experience, I found that it's very difficult to transfer with toppings on. So what I do is, very careful, you have to hold, get a, is you know, you want to get this in there. You want to put it on top of the stone, and you got to be really careful. Go towards the edge as much as possible, and then drop it down. And it can be kind of messed up originally. It's fine. Just be careful and kind of mess around with it a little bit. Get it so it's, you know, on the stone as much as you can. On the stone. So this is pretty much, you know, 99% on the stone. A little bit over there off. And that's going to happen from time to time. Now, it's reasonable to have this thing cook a little bit on the stone for a minute or two. Alright? So what I do next is I take garlic, okay, and I liberally pour it on. Again, you gotta be very careful because it's hot in there.
Yeah, because the heating element will burn you if you have a heating element on top.
Well,
Did you think of that? Yours is gas from below, but a lot of people have heating elements. So
That's a good point.
When you reach in there,
That's a good
you'll
point.
hit the top and you'll burn your finger off.
so that's not cool. You don't want to do that. I like to be liberal with my garlic, but you know, whatever you want is cool.
This is the method not recommended to do at home.
Professionals only.
Yeah. You can see it already cooking.
Okay. Next.
See the bubbles for me?
What's that?
I'm saying it's cooking already.
Yeah, it's cooking. See that? It's cooking. Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Next is the cheese. I like to do cheese first because it keeps the cheese on the dough. This is what Grimaldi's does actually. This is where I got it from. So in my pie, I do two per. I kind of space it out like this. So it's kind of. It can be two per side, but in this case, it's a little bit thinner than I wanted. So I'm not doing that, and I'll show you what I'm going to do instead. So, and you want to space it out at least. This thing's going to melt, so. You know, it's about an inch or so from each area, and then you can take pieces of it and kind of fill in the gap, like there, a little bit there, and really over there it should be fine because it's a decent amount of space there. I'll move it back a little bit. Put one over there. Well, that'll spread nicely. Okay, you don't need to cover not 100% of it. You can cover 90% of the pie with the cheese, and you're good. Now. Okay, so next, you take the sauce, and you know, it should be pretty chunky, because it'll get a little thin once you put it on the pie itself with the heat. Okay, this is very critical because you don't want to put too much sauce on. That's a major problem that people do. You do not want too much sauce. Okay, so I'm putting it very gently on everywhere, but remember, look, this doesn't look like that much, right? But this will spread once it cooks. And you obviously don't want to put it near you want to line it so it doesn't hit the crust. It's like a normal pie would, obviously. That's
So Nitin, how long did it take you to figure out these expert techniques? How many
couple
attempts?
years. Many attempts. A couple dozen. So this could be even a little too much sauce. But I think it's probably right. A little too much there, spread out a
This
little
is the
bit.
part they don't tell you on TV cooking shows.
So, there you go. I think that's spread nicely. And you want to get towards close to the crust here. And you mess around with it. This looks like a good amount. Alright. So that's that. And lastly, well, you can also add a little Italian seasoning if you like. I just add a little bit for that little flavor. Nothing crazy. Okay. And finally, olive oil. Drizzle it on, baby. Drizzle this shit on.
Excuse me, there's children watching this.
And I used to think when I first started this, oh, it's gonna make it wet, and it's gonna make it
So you're not part of this school of thought that thinks you're not putting oil afterwards.
I like to put it on during, but I think you put it on afterwards and be fine. Honestly,
There's two different schools.
I wasn't aware of those schools. Is that Harvard and Yale? What is that?
Yeah.
Voila! Now we wait.
How many minutes?
At least 10.
You have to watch it?
Lastly, well, you can also add a little Italian seasoning if you like. I just add a little bit for a little flavor. Nothing crazy. Okay. And finally, olive oil. Drizzle it on, baby. Drizzle this shit on.
Excuse me, there's children watching this.
And I used to think when I first started this, oh, it's gonna make it wet, and it's gonna make it
So you're not part of this school of thought that thinks about putting oil afterwards.
I like to put it on during, but I think you put it on afterwards and be fine. Honestly,
There's two different schools.
I wasn't aware of those schools. Is that Harvard and Yale? What is that?
Yeah.
Voila. Now we wait.
How many minutes?
At least 10.
You have to watch it?
Still on?
Yeah.
It's starting to get really nice and brown and crispy edges. Because of my oven, I tend to flip it. Just because he's cooked a little bit more on that side than this side, okay? Now, this is really critical because it's like, well, when is it done, right? When is it done? It's a key question. So, it's really up to you. I mean, you look at the bottom and you can see it's getting a little charred. It's almost there. You're talking minute or less, all right?
Yeah.
All right, stay tuned. It's starting to get really nice and brown and crispy edges. Because of my oven, I tend to flip it. Just because he's cooked a little bit more on that side than this side, okay? Now, this is really critical because it's like, well, when is it done, right? When is it done? It's a key question. So, it's really up to you. I mean, you look at the bottom and you can see it's getting a little charred. It's almost there. You're talking minute or less, all right?
Yeah.
All right, stay tuned. So, at this point, it's pretty, it's pretty hard at the bottom, so you can just take it out like that. And, let's take a look at the bottom real quick on the camera.
Don't drop it, don't drop it.
Look at that.
Oh,
Perfect. All right. Last step. Most important, one of the most important steps, basil.
the hardest step.
You cannot underestimate what basil does for a pizza. All these pizza companies, they rip you off by, hey, basil on it. There's like 2 sprigs.
That's why locale is so good. Remember?
That's why
I remember
locale is
they
so
went
good.
liberal.
Liberal, baby. Liberal, not conservative.
Yeah. Honestly, everybody
Throw that
tries
shit
to rip
on.
you off on basil. Everybody.
Everybody.
My family, they always order extra basil on all their pizzas.
That's baller. I'm too cheap to do that.
They ask for extra basil, extra sauce. Because they're true Indians.
Okay, so I would be liberal with the basil, they said.
Oh, it's amazing.
And that's that. Bon appetit! Pizza pie!